What happens when a franchise finally stops lying to itself, admits the foundation is cracked beyond repair, and watches as the entire league descends like vultures on their most valuable bargain bin asset? There's a particular brand of rage, mixed with reluctant acceptance, that comes with watching your team realize they've spent years building toward absolutely nothing. The Vancouver Canucks have finally ripped off the Band-Aid, acknowledged the brutal truth staring them in the face, and effectively hung everything must go sign in their front office window. They want younger. They want faster. They want to stop pretending that this aging, expensive, underperforming core has any chance of competing for anything meaningful. And now, like predators detecting wounded prey in Pacific waters, contending teams are swarming around one of the NHL's most criminally undervalued assets, Kiefer Sherwood. The asset everyone wants, and the price tag that's causing chaos the whispers have become declarations. The Canucks have officially informed the rest of the NHL that they're open for business, and Sherwood, that relentless physical bottom six winger carrying an absurdly team-friendly $1.5 million cap hit, has emerged as one of the trade deadline's hottest commodities. According to insider Rick Dhaliwal, Vancouver isn't asking for Moon. They're reportedly seeking a first-round pick for Sherwood. Some might consider that aggressive for a bottom six forward who'll never sniff an All-Star game. But here's the fascinating wrinkle that should have Canucks fans cautiously optimistic. At least one team has already indicated the price isn't unreasonable. Think about that for a moment. In a league where general managers typically lowball sellers and negotiate down from inflated asking prices, Vancouver has set a first-round pick as their floor, and teams aren't laughing them out of the room. They're actually considering it. Why? Because Sherwood's appeal transcends traditional valuation metrics. At $1.5 million against the cap, one NHL executive reportedly called his contract one of the league's best value deals. For context, that's cheaper than most fourth-liners on playoff rosters. Yet Sherwood brings legitimate top-nine capability when needed, hits like a freight train, forechecks with relentless intensity, kills penalties effectively, and provides that sandpaper identity that disappears in October but becomes absolutely invaluable when the playoffs arrive. The Boston Bruins and Minnesota Wild are among the confirmed suitors, and the fit makes perfect sense for both organizations. Boston, perpetually searching for affordable depth pieces to complement their aging core, needs exactly the kind of energy and physicality Sherwood provides. Minnesota, built on defensive structure and grinding hockey, could slot him seamlessly into their bottom six and watch him thrive in Dean Evason's system. But they're not alone. Multiple teams are circling, all recognizing that Sherwood represents that rare combination: impact without cap consequence. In an NHL where every dollar matters and contenders are squeezed against the ceiling, finding a player who contributes meaningfully at $1.5 million is like discovering gold buried in your backyard. Connor Garland, the complicated asset nobody wants to touch, while Sherwood generates legitimate bidding war buzz, Connor Garland presents a vastly more complicated puzzle. The diminutive winger has also drawn inquiries, but his situation is fundamentally different and far more problematic. Garland recently suffered an injury, and more significantly, he's carrying a long-term contract with substantial money remaining. For a Canucks organization desperate to shed salary and get younger, moving Garland requires finding a team willing to absorb both injury risk and long-term financial commitment. The market exists, but it's lukewarm at best. Teams are watching, evaluating, waiting to see if Vancouver becomes desperate enough to retain salary or sweeten the pot with additional assets. Garland possesses legitimate skill. His hands and hockey IQ are undeniable, but his size, defensive limitations, and contract make him a much tougher piece to move than the plug-and-play simplicity of Sherwood. According to reports, it'll take a much stronger offer to pry Garland away. And frankly, Vancouver might be better served holding him unless they receive an offer that genuinely improves their future. Trading assets just to trade them is how franchises extend their suffering indefinitely. If the return doesn't make you better 3 years from now, what's the point? Philadelphia enters the chat, but not for what you'd expect here, is where the trade landscape gets particularly intriguing and reveals just how dysfunctional Vancouver's roster construction has become. The Philadelphia Flyers are actively searching the market, and initial speculation suggested they might be targeting center help. That would make sense. Philadelphia's depth down the middle has been inconsistent, and adding a reliable pivot could stabilize their lineup for a playoff push. But Dhaliwal threw cold water on that theory, emphatically stating that if the Flyers are looking for center help, they should look anywhere but Vancouver. Why? Because the Canucks' center depth is, to put it charitably, among the worst in the NHL. This is both hilarious and tragic. Vancouver's organizational failure at the center position has been so profound that insiders are openly advising other teams to avoid even asking. It's a damning indictment of roster construction, draft strategy, and player development. And it underscores exactly why the Canucks find themselves in this position, selling off veterans because they failed to build sustainable depth at hockey's most important position. Instead, Philadelphia's interest likely centers on defense, an area where Vancouver actually has movable pieces. The Flyers need blue line help desperately, and if Vancouver can package a defenseman in a deal that brings back youth or picks, it could represent the kind of smart, forward-thinking move this franchise desperately needs to execute. The broader picture, Vancouver's crossroads and the cost of denial, step back from the individual names and examine the larger narrative unfolding in Vancouver. This isn't just about trading Kiefer Sherwood or fielding lukewarm calls on Connor Garland. This is about an organization finally acknowledging that their competitive window has slammed shut and that clinging to veteran players in the vain hope of sneaking into a playoff spot is organizational malpractice. Getting younger isn't just a buzzword or public relations spin. It's survival. The Canucks have spent years trapped in hockey purgatory. Not bad enough to secure elite draft picks, not good enough to genuinely contend. They've mortgaged futures for short-term gains that never materialized. They've handed out contracts that aged poorly before the ink dried. And now, they're left with a roster full of veterans whose trade value is evaporating by the week. The decision to open the floodgates and make multiple players available is the right one, perhaps the only one that makes sense. But execution matters enormously. If Vancouver panics and accepts underwhelming returns because they're desperate to move salary, they'll simply extend their rebuild by years. If they hold firm, extract maximum value, and prioritize draft capital and young assets, they might actually accelerate their path back to relevance. What Sherwood's market tells us about modern NHL economics, Sherwood's burgeoning trade market reveals something crucial about today's NHL. Value contracts are more important than ever. In a flat cap environment where contenders are perpetually squeezed, finding impact players on affordable deals is the difference between depth and desperation. Teams aren't just acquiring Sherwood for what he does on the ice, though his physicality, forechecking, and penalty killing are all legitimate assets. They're acquiring him because his $1.5 million cap hit allows them to add without subtracting elsewhere. He's the rare player who makes a roster better without forcing painful decisions in other areas. This is exactly why Vancouver must hold out for a first-round pick. Sherwood isn't just a rental. He's cost-controlled, he's versatile, and he addresses needs that every playoff team has. If multiple franchises are interested, the Canucks should leverage that competition ruthlessly and refuse to settle for a second-rounder or mid-tier prospect. The market is there. The value is real. Don't undersell. The emotional weight of watching a franchise dismantle, there's something profoundly melancholy about watching a team admit defeat and begin dismantling the pieces. For Canucks fans who've endured years of false hope and broken promises, this trade deadline represents both relief and resignation. Relief that management finally recognizes reality. Resignation that the path forward is long, uncertain, and littered with the wreckage of poor decisions made by previous regimes. Kefir Sherwood, in many ways, symbolizes what Vancouver could have been. Hardworking, affordable, effective. Instead, he'll likely be wearing another team's jersey by March, contributing to someone else's playoff run while the Canucks watch from home and wonder how it all went so catastrophically wrong. The Bruins and Wild are circling, Other teams are watching quietly. The price is set, or at least it should be. Now comes the hardest part: actually executing the trade without caving to pressure or accepting less than Sherwood is genuinely worth. Final thought: don't blink. Vancouver the Canucks stand at a crossroads. They can either maximize this opportunity, extracting first-round picks, acquiring young assets, and genuinely committing to a proper rebuild, or they can panic, accept underwhelming returns, and extend their suffering for another half-decade. Kiefer Sherwood is worth a first-round pick. Multiple teams agree. The market supports it. The only question is whether Vancouver's front office has the conviction to hold firm when a general manager inevitably tries to lowball them with a second-rounder and a B-level prospect. Don't blink. Don't settle. And for once, make the smart, patient, forward-thinking decision that this franchise has avoided for far too long. The vultures are circling, but that doesn't mean you have to give away the carcass for free. Make them pay premium prices, or tell them to look elsewhere. What's your take? Should Vancouver hold out for that first-round pick, or take the best offer available and move on? Are the Canucks finally making the right moves, or is this just another chapter in their ongoing organizational dysfunction? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I want to hear whether you think this fire sale is genius asset management or panic-induced desperation. And if you're as fired up about this trade deadline chaos as I am, smash that like button so we can keep delivering the hard-hitting analysis that cuts through the noise.